We're joined by John Shannon, the former executive producer, Hockey Night in Canada, of course, the co-host of the Bob and Cowan podcast, and you're fresh from the Hockey Hall of Fame induction ceremony last night, John. One of your favorite nights of the year.
You know, the NHL and the hockey world, because the Hall of Fame is not run by the NHL; it's run under its own guise, and there's a board, and the IHF's involved, the NHL's involved, the City of Toronto's involved. And it is spectacular because nobody walks in the building on that Monday night worrying about wins or losses or what should happen, and everybody's in the right mood. And the hockey world does two things right: the draft and Hall of Fame night. And so I walked up to a president of a club last night. They said, well, here we are on the only night that's not going to be screwed up, because you're going to screw up the draft. Don't screw up the draft, and don't screw up Hall of Fame night. There is so much fun. Seeing old friends, seeing Hall of Famers. There's a little bit of that kid in the room when I walk around and see guys. Well, most of them are now my contemporaries, but some of the older guys that are in the Hall of Fame that I watched as a kid that are able to walk around still. It's really cool. And then when your friends go in, right? You know, Mike Vernon, I've known Mike Vernon since he was 16 years old. He's in the Hall of Fame. And our old pal Hitch. You know, and Kenny and I go back a long way, and to see Ken there last night, I've never seen him humbled and quiet as he was last night, because I think he was just overwhelmed with everything that happened.
Pretty good speeches, though. Like, we accuse the hockey players during their careers of being, cliche ridden, and a lot of them are. But even the cliche ridden guys, often they get to that dais and they've got some pretty good things to say. And it's too bad that it takes to that point for some of them to be that verbose and to let us inside a little bit. But the speech is pretty good.
Oh, everybody. I mean, not everybody's Henrik Lundqvist, let's face it. But, a guy like Vernon, who was always known as a little bit flippant, but when he got on the ice, he was a competitor. To me, when Mike gets up and speaks like that, you go, holy smokes. This game does create some character in some people, and it's really nice to see. It was one of those events that you don't want it to end, you know. And when my Uber driver showed up, it was a little.
It was sad. It's taking Cinderella back home, huh, John?
Yeah, the pumpkin was ready to change, but it was a little later than I had imagined. But we got home on time, so.
It's always later with you, Shannon. That's my experience.
No, well, that's it. I mean, hey, listen, I've never been in this business just for the nuts and bolts. I'm in for the frivolity and fun and people.
Sure,
that's what it's all about.
I remember closing a bar in Chicago with you once upon a time in a draft.
Do not tell me.
Okay, all right. Mum's the word. Let me ask you this. You say it's perfect, but teams play and it doesn't have the whole attention of the modern day NHL because others are engaged. Should it be dark? Should the NHL go dark for Hall of Fame night?
It should, but it can't. There are contractual obligations to networks. Rogers needs a Monday night game on their calendar, and the Hall of Fame, which is a relationship with TSN, so obviously there's a rivalry there. Has this Monday night. The NHL does its best to try to help. The Friday night game, the Flames playing the Maple Leafs, the Hall of Fame night, which was, and then the Canucks are in on Saturday. Leafs have rarely played back-to-back games in 24 hours at home, but the league tries to help the Hall of Fame out with that game on Friday night. In this case was because Mike Vernon was a Canadian a Flame going in, and it just made some sense that way. But I'd love to see a dark night. Colorado played last night too, and Pierre Lacroix was one of the guys honored.
That's right. So let me ask this then. Should the Hall of Fame find a different night? Should the Hall of Fame find a off-calendar night? Do it
That's
in the
a great
summer.
question.
Or between the preceseason and the regular season, like that, those couple of days there.
It's not it shouldn't be out of the question. But there should be more synergy between the two. But I say this unabashedly, there are still egos involved. The Hall wants to make sure that it is not known as the NHL Hall of Fame. It's known as the Hockey Hall of Fame. So they don't want to be pushed around by the NHL, even if it's obvious, even though the commissioner speaks. There's more at stake for all of the game of hockey, whether it's the Federation and the IIHF have really upped their game in being involved in the Hall of Fame as well. The international part of the game, women's hockey part of that. It's difficult to try to say, okay, we have to cater to the NHL when there are no other valuable constituents involved in the Hall and in the game of hockey.
Okay, so here's the tough question. We may have asked you this when the class was announced, and I think Hitch gets a pass because he's fourth in all-time wins. He belongs there for sure. The three players, in my opinion, the men's players, bubble players, like they're right there for me because I'm a small hall guy. Do you draw?
That's my
yeah. So where do you fall on these guys?
Henrik Lundqvist, with his numbers, with an Olympic gold medal. I'm big on championships. Mm-hmm. I believe in championships being a factor, not the only factor, but being a factor. So Henrik Lundqvist didn't win the Stanley Cup, did get to the final, but won Olympic gold in 2006 and was the only reason they got to the gold medal game in 2014, in my opinion, against Canada. So Henrik Lundqvist, with what he did as a New York Ranger, I think is probably as good as you're going to get. Mike Vernon should have been in before. A Conn Smythe Trophy winner, 2 Stanley Cups, won the World Junior Hockey Championship. Pretty good numbers overall. And the day after he gets inducted to the Hall of Fame, should Pierre Turgeon be part of that? I don't know. Pierre Turgeon's the one for me that I go. But then you talk to people who have played against him and were much closer to him than I am, and they can't stop talking about how he had been snubbed and how great he was as a player and the value he had to a team. And Tom Barrasso should have been in ages ago too. Tom Barrasso took a long time to get in the Hall of Fame because Tom Barrasso can be a little prickly. And wasn't a friend of ours, any of ours, in this business, and therefore fans thought he was a bit of a jerk. But that didn't stop him from being a great goaltender at the age of 18 to win 2 trophies in his first year as a teenager, and then to win the 2 Stanley Cups with Mario Lemieux in Pittsburgh.
A little prickly.
Well,
very diplomatic, Ambassador Shannon.
It's Tuesday. I'm being mellow.
Yes. The first ballot candidates next year are Shea Weber, Pavel Datsyuk, Ilya Kovalchuk, Ryan Miller. Who do you like from there? Datsyuk, right? Can we all agree Datsyuk will be in?
Yeah, for sure. Datsuk's in for sure.
Yeah.
What about the others?
I'm in Blake's bubble world.
Yeah.
I'm in Blake's bubble world. I'd love to have Shea Weber in the Hall of Fame, but do we just put him in the Hall of Fame because he's got a great shot?
Yeah. I mean, certainly was a big part of Canadian Olympic gold medal teams, the last not Stanley Cup champion.
You start pinpointing that type of thing and he was a great player in the NHL, didn't get the notice at all in Nashville. Let's face it. We never saw him play, but everybody talked how great he was. If we start doing that pinpoint stuff of international hockey, then we're going to revisit Paul Henderson. And I'm not suggesting that Henderson is a snub because I don't believe he should be in the Hall of Fame for 3 great weeks of hockey.
Yes, agreed.
But his team is, and the display, I saw it last night again, and it's fantastic.
And that's what I always say, John, particularly when our friend Mr. Pratt out here used to bang his fist on the table for Henderson. I go, Dave, go to the Hockey Hall of Fame. I assure you the 72 Summit team is well represented there.
Well represented.
There's a massive display there with Paul front and center.
I think unique skills are a thing. As Shea Weber has 224 goals as a defenseman. He's 16th all time in that regard. I think everybody above him in that list is in the Hall. I don't think Steve Duchesne is. Maybe the one exception, Steve Duchesne.
No.
But I think everybody else above him in that list is in the Hall of Fame. So, when you have a unique skill, as Shea Weber did, is in terms of scoring goals, maybe you do put him in.
It's really a hard discussion to have, not from the point of view of what numbers put on the piece of paper, but Shea Weber had a great career. He was a valuable member of Nashville and in Montreal. I'm not going to say I remembered him playing for Arizona very long, but and it was great for Canada. And if you say, well, he doesn't belong in the Hall of Fame, it makes it sound like a failure. And that's that becomes the real issue, is that yes, we know he was a star. He was a star in the National Hockey League, but was it Hall of Fame worthy? And that really is that's an interesting conversation to have without creating some negative overtones of, wow, they don't think he was that good.
It's not a slight to not be in. No,
right. Well, which goes back to when I think, I can't speak for both of you, but I think we feel the same way, is that we'd like more transparency in the whole nomination process and the voting and everything. And the Hall and the committee for all these years has tried to protect that for this very reason, so that people who don't get in aren't embarrassed.
Right.
And so they're trying to protect that integrity of those really good players, great players sometimes, that probably don't deserve to be in the Hall of Fame.
And with regards to former Canuck Ryan Miller, he sort of falls into a Curtis Joseph Chris Osgood category in terms of you. And I know wins are an imperfect stat with the analytics guys, but it is a measure of how long you've been successful as an NHL. His 391 wins are 14th all time. That's right behind Osgood's 401. It's actually quite a shout from Kujos, 454. But then you get back to the Stanley Cup argument, right? Yeah. And Osgood has them, and Joseph and Miller do not. And Vernon is a few wins back of Ryan Miller, and he just got in because, as John notes, Stanley Cup and Conn Smythe. Let's move on. Okay. Bo Horvat returns here Wednesday. He's already talked to reporters there in New York. What kind of reception do you think he'll get here? What kind of reception do you think he deserves here? And we're asking today, was that trade sort of the catalyst behind the turnaround of these Vancouver Canucks?
I don't think so. Only to say that maybe I'm just debating the word catalyst. To me, that trade told everybody that everything's on the table. That, being the way the Canucks were just was not acceptable to this group of people running the team. And so, and we all do it in every market we ever live in, that, we fall in love with players. We fall in love with, well, they're really good, and as Bo became, so popular in Vancouver, this is a win-win for Canuck fans and for the Canucks. Horvat coming back, it should be a great video tribute. It should be a standing ovation, and the Canucks will win. How do you go wrong? That's, and the Canucks are playing as well as we've seen them play in how long? 11, 12 years?
Well, at this point, ever, really. They've never had a record like this.
But I'm just saying, if you try to get this through 82 games, are we talking since 2011?
11, 12, there are some winning streaks that are comparable to this one.
Yeah, so to me, I hope for the Canucks' sake, I hope for Bo's sake, that it's a positive night all the way around. And hey, give him a power play goal too, but we know the Canucks will beat the Islanders these days.
Well, yeah, Islanders played pretty well against the Oilers last night through 2 periods of play, and then just fell apart against a team that had a new coach behind the bench. So, if they play as well as they did through 40 minutes, they probably have a chance versus the Canucks. But you do feel bad for Bo Horvat. I mean, it doesn't seem like the Islanders have necessarily been the greener grass on the other side of the fence for him.
No, but first of all, you look at their numbers, and they're in that mushy middle, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the NHL, they've already taken too many games to 65 minutes, in my mind. They've had a difficult time holding leads at times, but I think the expectation that Bo was going to come there and be that high-scoring player that we all thought he was in Vancouver the last couple of years, that's just not the way the Islanders play the game. That's not Lou Lamoriello hockey. I would think, though, I mean, lifestyle, guaranteed contract. Bo's done okay. Bo's doing fine.
He's almost a great per game too. He's doing okay.
Like it's a great place to live.
Yeah,
make no bones about it. Living in Nassau or Suffolk County on Long Island it's like out of the movies sometimes. Little neighborhoods, Glen Cove. It's one of those well-kept secrets about where to live. And now that they've got a really high-end arena, I don't think any players are really complaining about playing for the Islanders.
Plus amazing accents all around.
Yes.
The Long Island accent. Where did you live when you were running broadcasting in New York?
I was right down. I was in Manhattan. So but I was only there. I commuted. I tried to spend 2 days in Toronto every week. So because I didn't want my kids to leave school. So I was a Monday to Friday New Yorker and a Saturday, Sunday Mississauga guy. So
gotcha.
What's Ken up? Oh, go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, speaking of that Oilers Islanders game. So I've heard people in Edmonton twist themselves into knots trying to tell us that this wasn't at Connor McDavid's urging or design. And I've seen others from outside of Edmonton talking about the Lebronification of the NHL is upon us. Star players are now calling the shots with their teams. Which is the truth, as you know it?
The former. I don't think that Connor was involved in much, if any, of this. I think Jeff Jackson had targeted Chris Knobloch a long time ago.
But did he target him because of the connection? Like, is he?
Well, I mean, the coincidence was that Jeff Jackson was Connor's agent when Knobloch and Connor were both in Erie.
Yeah.
So there were relationships. And the relationship in the end that got Knobloch the job wasn't the relationship with Connor McDavid. It was the relationship with Jeff Jackson. This probably was an inevitability, if not on the weekend of November the 11th, but probably the week after the regular season and playoffs ended for the Edmonton Oilers anyway. I think Chris Knobloch was going to be the head coach of the Edmonton Oilers next October when they started the season. So this has just been accelerated what was part of the plan.
Hockey's famous for this or / infamous for it, John. Like sometimes it looks lazy. The guys only look within their own sphere to make hires or to sign players. So sometimes it works. I mean, we were kind of a little bit half-cocked looking at what the Pittsburgh Mafia was doing here in Vancouver, but in the end, they make decisions on guys like Cole and Lafferty, and they've worked out. Sometimes it just makes sense. Sometimes the puzzle pieces that they know actually fit into the new puzzle.
Exactly. I mean, the example I gave to a lot of people yesterday was Pierre Lacroix went in the Hall of Fame last night. Do you think he should not have traded for one of his former clients, Patrick Waugh, to go to Denver? I mean, it's who you know and who you trust.
Yeah,
that's a big part of it. Chris Knobloch should have been in the National Hockey League long before last night. He's a very good coach. I got to know Chris when he was in Erie when I was doing junior hockey for Sportsnet, and I think Chris Knobloch is one of those guys that maybe he doesn't have that outgoing personality, but he has a great demeanor with his players. He knows the game very well, and I think that is a huge factor in the modern day NHL. Fire and brimstone, as we learned from Mike Babcock, doesn't work anymore. And what the Rangers are disappointed. The Rangers are disappointed they lost Chris Knobloch as their number one training coach for their young guys leaving Hartford and going to Madison Square Garden. They weren't happy to see Knobloch go, but they've got Peter Laviolette, and they didn't give it to Knobloch. That's their mistake if they think Knobloch was that good. Knobloch deserved a chance, and the Oilers gave it to him. And that said, I did not advocate that Jay should have been let go. I mean, I thought Jay did a good job. And I truly believe the players still trusted Jay and trusted Dave Manson. And this was something that came from somewhere else that said we have to make a change in order to try to regain some confidence in the market.
Lastly, John, much made about these Flames defensemen, UFA defensemen, and how they'll be available here soon if Calgary continues to languish. Zadorov, Tanev to Vancouver. Do you see either or both being a fit here?
Well, you know what? Sentimentally, I'd love to see Chris Tanev back in Vancouver, and I think we've learned since he's left the Canucks what a value he has to a franchise. I mean, the Calgary Flames and Chris Tanev played when he was healthy, where the personality of that blue line was totally different. He's a character guy. I think, listen, if Craig Conroy and management in Calgary decide that they are going to blow it up, which I think they'll probably make that decision by the end of December, there'll be a huge cry for Chris Tanev to join a team that, whether that's Edmonton or Toronto or Vancouver, because Tanev has that innate ability to make everybody around him better and sacrifice. And that's what he does. Zadorov has, I don't think you can't help but love what Zadorov says and how he's played the game. And again, I think that we'll know that first week in January, whether the Flames are going to blow it up and go. And I think there'll be a giant, and any team that's either thinks they're that close to the Stanley Cup or that close to needing to get a guy like Zadorov to get to the playoffs, there'll be huge demand for both those guys.
Thank you, John. Have a good week.
You too, boys. Happy Tuesday.
This clip brought to you by Betway. Must be 19 plus to play. Please play responsibly.